Sorry that this video is coming out so damn late. One of the hinges on my computer broke, and despite being promised that it'd be done in time for the July 4th weekend, it somehow took 2 weeks just to glue the shittin' thing back together. And I still wouldn't have it if I hadn't called the repair guy up and yelled, "I'm taking my computer back in 2 days whether it's fixed or not." Yeah, I ain't happy. But while I was bereft of computer, I used the downtime to play Transformers Devastation on the PlayStation 4, and I really liked it. Devastation is a very fast-paced beat-em-up game where you have multiple 2-button combos and a dodge roll that stops time for a few seconds if you get the timing exactly right. It plays a lot like Bayonetta, but with a much greater emphasis on firearm combat. There's a metric crap ton of weapons to collect, forge together to pull abilities, and experiment with. You've got a huge arsenal of swords, gauntlets, hammers, and axes that wildly change your basic attacks, a multitude of ray guns and machine guns you use to fight flying enemies, plus grenade launchers, missile launchers, and shotguns that you can use for crowd control or to nail enemies with quick stuns and status ailments. The combat is fast and furious with a ton of enemy variety that, for me, never wore out its welcome. There are 5 distinct playable characters, and the game makes brilliant use of the transforming. Your vehicle form essentially acts as a dash, and you often have to ram enemies to break their shields. The combat is solid, the controls are great, and the game is a true blast to play. My complaints are minor. Boss characters can kill you in a few hits, and it seems like bosses just hit you anyway, regardless of whether you dodge roll, unless you get the literally split-second timing that's required to trigger the time stop. Several boss fights I began throwing whatever nearby objects I could find against a wall because a boss knocked off all my health in one combo that I missed dodging by 1/10 of a second, or a swarm of bosses continuously sucker punched me to death from off-screen. Bosses also flushed all of my extra lives down the toilet because it always took me a few lives to get the boss's patterns down, and the game burns the precious rare auto-revive droids the next time you die. There's no way to save them for when you need them. Used items don't come back if you die and reload a checkpoint, so if you use all your healing items on a boss and die anyway, you start the boss over with none of those healing items. The game also spends a lot of time building up a character and plot thread, only to completely drop them and blatantly say they're being saved for a sequel. That is, at this point, hypothetical. But overall, Devastation is a really damn fun game, and I heartily recommend it. And now back to our regularly scheduled review. A month ago, thank you very much computer repair guy, I reviewed the Transformers movie licensed games on the Wii. They sucked. The first one was halfway decent, and the other 3 sucked. But I do have some good Transformers games to show you on the Nintendo DS, because while the Wii releases were sucking 8 ways from Sunday, the Wii's handheld counterpart was delivering 2 kick-ass Transformers games. Let's start at the beginning. Transformers, based on the first live-action movie. Yeah, sorry about the footage, this is the only way I have to capture DS videos. This is why I don't review DS games, guy who keeps requesting Pirates of the Caribbean to Advanced Chest. The game cuts out every single one of the human characters from the movie. Instead, the film story is told through the perspective of a rookie Transformer who crashes to Earth. Yes, the first innovation of the game, and something I can't believe no other Transformers game has attempted. You get to create your own custom Transformer and actually be an integral part of the plot. The game world is chock full of vehicles that you can scan, and in between levels you can switch your character's vehicle form to any of the vehicles you've unlocked. Each has a different robot mode, stats, and weapons. Hell, you even get to change its colors. It's a great motivation to explore the game world and track down all the alternate forms, like a news chopper, ice cream van, hippie van, school bus, and my personal favorite, the Sector 7 assault helicopter that looks suspiciously like Shockwave when in robot form. It's freaking awesome. The only thing that would be better is if you could change how your character acts in the story mode, because as it stands, the custom Autobot pretty much has the same personality as Hot Rod, and not Frenchy Foo Pepe Le Pew Hot Rod from the movie. He's an overeager Autobot, desperate to prove himself, who ends up having to redeem himself when he's directly responsible for Bumblebee getting captured. But still, the ability to create and customize your own custom character, in addition to playing as the movie's cast, is incredibly cool. The game was released in separate versions for Autobots and Decepticons, and I obviously have the Autobot version. The Decepticon version has a major subplot where Starscream tries to stage a rebellion against Megatron, to the point that Starscream is the final boss after Optimus is dead. I bring this up because Starscream has plotted to overthrow Megatron in every adaptation of Transformers except for the movies. The handheld version of a movie-licensed game is a far more faithful adaptation than the movie itself. That is some baloney. The gameplay is very smooth. You can move and turn with ease, you strafe automatically when locked onto enemies instead of awkwardly wasting buttons on the commands, all of the bots and vehicles are highly maneuverable, and all of the vehicle controls are intuitive and mapped with common sense. The helicopter controls like a damn helicopter with easy ascend and descend commands. The planes handle like a normal ship in a normal flying game. It's easy to go where you want and do what you want, and the controls never fight you or make a task difficult. Combat is pretty basic. You have a 3-hit combo, you can pick up items and either chuck them or bash them over enemies' heads, and you have one light and one heavy projectile weapon. But the game elevates its extremely straightforward combat system by turning the combat into a game of energy management. Both of your guns use energy that regenerates but doesn't regenerate fast, and by the halfway point of the game, you're fighting pretty large groups of highly maneuverable military vehicles. You don't have nearly the power to just shoot all the enemies, and most of the missions prevent you from just running away to recover energy. You have to carefully maneuver around enemies and use whatever melee techniques necessary to brawl with enemies, only using your projectile weapon sparingly, and by the halfway point, the game requires a fair amount of skill and strategy to get any further. Levels also have a great variety to them, with a lot of combat missions, but also some lenient escort missions and driving stages with a physics engine that doesn't suck. And the story is pretty interesting, with some great character moments, characters who aren't obnoxious stereotypes like the movie, and genuine mystery and suspense. The game has a fantastic story campaign, but the thing that kept me coming back to this game for years is the sandbox. Each game has 4 separate sandbox maps. One is the Hoover Dam, complete with Sector 7's full base, and one is a humongous city map. The controls are so fluent that it's fun as hell just to dick around the maps. There's bonus missions and challenges to hunt down, and you can go on your own personal little rampage anytime that you want, with human police and military vehicles coming at you full force as you destroy more shit in the environment. This forces you to either wipe out all the enemies attacking you until they give up, or hide in your vehicle form until the heat's off. And once you've beaten the story mode, you can dick around the sandbox with the movies cast as well. The sandbox just feels like a giant playground where you can go wherever you want and do whatever you want, and I loved it for years. As much as I really like this game, it just doesn't do what it does well enough to cross over from being a good game to a great game. As cool as it is to play as your own custom bot, there's not a ton of difference between how vehicles perform, and there's a grand total of 5 robot modes across all the vehicles, due both to technical limitations and the limited development time. Not every vehicle can be scanned, so you can bust your ass trying to scan a tank or a cop car, only to get jacked for your efforts. As fun as it is to cruise around the open world maps at your whim, there's not really anything to do besides go on a murder spree. And while it's an awesome idea that civilian vehicles can spontaneously turn out to be enemy transformers and attack you, the basic Autobot and Decepticon goons die really easily, and they're little more than a momentary nuisance. Plus, you really should get the Decepticon version if you want to buy the game nowadays, because the only way to play as a jet in the Autobot game is to unlock the Skydive custom form in the online multiplayer. The online multiplayer that has long since been shut down and sucked even when it was up. All you did in the online multiplayer was play one of the in-game side missions over and over, and all the players' scores across the different versions would be pooled to get chunks of the Allspark. And they ended up just rigging it so each side alternated getting rewards each week anyway, because the DS was notoriously easy to hack. Transformers on the Nintendo DS is a good game with ideas and concepts that are crying out to be fully realized in a great game, but it's still awesome, and I highly recommend it. The Revenge of the Fallen DS game sadly jettisons most of what I liked in the first game. There's no open world, and while you do still play as your own custom character, all you do is select a light, medium, or heavy build at the start of the game, which you're stuck with permanently. You don't even get to change your character's color, and the only difference between the 3 builds is their movement speed. But once I got past my disappointment, I found that Revenge of the Fallen is a really damn good third-person shooter with gameplay that far surpasses the first DS game. If anything, the controls are more responsive, with a camera that perfectly follows you around, locking onto enemies being bound to the easy shoulder button, and a control scheme streamlined with several intuitive contextual commands. Now all of the weapons have unlimited ammo, the Transformer enemies have a lot of health so they can actually put up a fight, and enemies fire a lot of projectiles that can kill you quickly. The name of the game this time around is dodging, as you have to strafe, jump around, and leap over terrain to dodge enemy fire long enough to kill the enemies. Rather than just plowing through the enemies, it's more about nimbleness and maneuverability, and it plays like an effective mix of shooter and platformer. Gameplay is engaging and and the movement controls are so fluent that it's a lot of fun. Levels are big and open with new weapons and unlockable equipment to explore for to boost your character's stats, making exploration rewarding. There's a large arsenal of weapons to find and experiment with, each with their own strengths and drawbacks. Trick is, you have to actually find the weapons before you can experiment with them. In addition, you can use the XP you get during levels to upgrade your character's stats however you want, tailoring your character to suit your needs and playstyle. There's not much else to say about it. It's just a well-made third-person shooter with platforming elements, smooth intuitive controls, and engaging fun gameplay. The game largely jettisons the plot of the movie. If you're the Autobots, you're just trying to liberate the world from Decepticons, and if you're the Decepticons, you're trying to take over the world. You take it in turns visiting each continent on the planet, you do 3 missions with your custom character, and then you do 3 secondary missions with the movie characters. The main levels are basic action shooting levels, while the secondary missions run through a huge range of objectives. There's races, driving, obstacle courses, frantic fights where you have to clean out a ton of enemies in a short time limit. It gives a huge variety to the levels that constantly shakes up the game, and all of them are pretty fun. Once you finish that continent's 3 stages and secondary missions, you play a story mission, which for the Decepticon version that I have, basically means get Megatron's body or hunt down Jetfire and beat the Matrix out of him, ticking off the absolute bare minimum plot points necessary, and then you go to the next continent to continue. There's just enough story to keep you invested and tie the levels together, but there's not a whole lot of actual plot. Attempting to adapt Revenge of the Fallen's complete mess of a script, that might have been the best idea. I got the Decepticon version because I was hoping to get to fly around levels as Starscream or Grindor. Seriously, that's not Blackout because we said so, shut up. And I was hoping to get to tear shit up as Megatron's tank form. That didn't really happen. You do get Megatron for a few levels, but it's only for 2 short, unsatisfying missions, and the 2 Starscream flying levels really suck. Starscream doesn't shoot straight, and the gameplay largely devolves into flying by enemies until you hit them by dumb luck. Plus the controls are stiff, and it's easy to die. You're probably better off getting the Autobot version of the game, which I'm guessing just has 2 more standard levels in place of the crappy flying missions. It's not like they could do Autobot flying levels anyway, since they turned my favorite character and the primary flying Autobot into an incontinent, senile old man. If I had to come up with one criticism of the game, the boss battles are pretty sucky. All you do is circle strafe the boss and then scan one console when he runs away. Even Optimus just stands in the middle of the room wondering why he's getting his ass handed to him. The ending of the game is just hilarious. The last level, you go to Egypt to play the climax of the movie, and your custom Decepticon kills Optimus Prime. The Fallen, who somehow looks way better in the handheld game than he does on the Wii, is so impressed that a Decepticon actually managed to win a battle without screwing up, that your rookie custom bot is promoted to being the new commander of the Decepticons. You literally usurp Megatron's post while he stands off to the side getting laughed at by Starscream, based entirely on the fact that you are somewhat competent. It just strikes me as this hilarious meta moment of the franchise mocking its own tropes and just lambasting how utterly useless the Decepticons are in the movies. I love it. I was on cloud 9 after the Revenge of the Fallen DS game. The Nintendo DS was 2 for 2 on kick-ass Transformers games. I thought I'd struck a gold mine. Unfortunately, Dark of the Moon is where my luck officially ran out. The Dark of the Moon DS game isn't just bad, it's like it assimilated all of the badness that the first 2 games escaped from. A scathing review from Nintendo Power thankfully warned me off from this game, so I didn't get disappointed by it, but still, I got to finish what I started and close out the trilogy. After 2 straight games that handled like total dreams, the controls suck ass. The game uses tank controls where you turn in place instead of moving in the direction you press, and strafing is awkwardly mapped to the shoulder buttons, so you have to operate the D-pad and 2 separate buttons just to move in a simple direction. There's no custom character, only 4 characters from the movie who all control exactly the same and have exactly the same weapons, stats, mobility, and ammo. All of the levels except the tutorial stage are tight, boring linear corridors, and the combat is boring as hell. There's no way to avoid getting hit by the enemies because their bullets move at warp speed and just hit you instantly, and your only real attacks are a machine gun with infinite ammo and missiles. The machine gun is a glorified water pistol that does almost no damage, so the only way to survive combat is to use missiles on every single enemy and hope the enemies die before you do. There's no tactics involved here. Every single enemy you kill drops both health and missiles as a last-ditch effort to keep the game playable. You'll never run out of ammo, and the enemies can't dodge your fire. They don't don't even have the AI to make the attempt. So every single combat encounter, you just kind of wander around holding the fire button and pounding the missile fire button until all the enemies die, and there is zero finesse on top of that. Every single fight in the game boils down to hold down shoot buttons and win. There are exactly 3 enemy types in the game: basic goons with slightly longer health bars, and sometimes a boss who are basic goons with really long health bars. You fight the exact same enemies in the last level of the game as you do in the first, and none of the enemies do anything except run straight towards you and fire the basic gun. It's basically one single fight repeated about 100 times. There are a few other attacks in the game, but the game is so blatantly incomplete that every single gameplay mechanic except shoot with basic guns is horrendously unbalanced and doesn't work. It's ridiculous how many blatantly unfinished mechanics are in the game. You can launch one melee attack with a long-ass wind-up animation, but if you even attempt melee combat, the enemies will shrug you off, deck you across the room, and deal a ton of damage. You can shoot in your vehicle form using the stupid-ass Stealth Force mode yet again, but you can't fire missiles in your vehicle form, so you just get the shit pounded out of you since the enemies take forever to die without missiles. You can pick up and throw items for massive damage, but most levels don't have any throwable items, and even if they do, it takes so long to throw shit you'll get destroyed if you even try to. You can hack turrets to turn them to your side, but turrets are rare, enemies rarely spawn around turrets to get any use out of them, and you have to stand still getting shot to shit to scan them in the first place. Upgrading requires both finding an upgrade slot and paying energon, but the upgrades are so cheap you're literally given about 50 times more energon than it's physically possible to use. The first level has you leap over buildings to traverse levels, and all the other stages have low invisible ceilings specifically to stop you from doing that. Some levels have you protect buildings from enemies, and the AI is so dense it just keeps charging straight at you rather than even attempting to attack the target. The game's automatic targeting system for enemies will flit schizophrenically back and forth between enemies rather than concentrate fire on one guy, so all the enemies take as long as possible to kill as you keep changing targets at random and beyond your control. Enemies don't grow stronger as the game goes on or scale up with your power-ups, so once you've leveled up your basic weapons a few times and gotten a longer health bar, literally the only things you can pour upgrades into, the game becomes completely trivial. Several levels have paths that lead to nowhere. Just every single minor thing that wasn't absolutely essential to the game is completely broken. The game also runs like rusty crap, with frequent slowdowns, especially if there's a structure you're supposed to protect, and especially if you're using bigger characters Ironhide and Optimus. Enemies always spawn in groups of exactly 3 to keep the game from melting down, and if you run away from enemies, which you can sometimes get away with, the previous group will actually self-destruct so that the next group can spawn. I've never seen a Nintendo DS game struggle to run like this. It's ridiculous! Finally, and fatally, there's pretty much zero story. The bulk of the game, you're just wandering around random locations, fighting random Decepticons, doing random things, and none of it ties together. The first level, Bumblebee is just stopping some random attack on some city. The second level, Ironhide is told to stop Mixmaster from reviving Devastator, but all you do is protect a few buildings, and neither Mixmaster nor Devastator are ever mentioned again. Levels 3 and 5, Optimus is hunting Soundwave. You seemingly kill him, and then Optimus tells the other Autobots not to fight Soundwave, who I guess survived me pounding his ass. And then Soundwave is never mentioned again after those levels. Levels 4 and 6 are just Mirage poking around random nest bases, investigating disturbances where you never find out what was going on. Level 7 has Ironhide try to stop Decepticons from getting into some random base they're attacking for some unspecified reason. And Level 8 just has Bumblebee poking around a volcano area, and they don't even try to explain that. It's not until the last 4 stages the game actually has a plot, and they recycle that shitty story from the Stealth Force edition where you have to stop Megatron from reviving Shockwave in Siberia, which we all know is doomed to fail anyway. I just don't get it. The plot of Dark of the Moon, once you get past 90 minutes of stupid humans and wondering how Ken Jeong still has a career, is that the Decepticons have taken over Chicago and a small Autobot strike force has to fight through the entire occupied city to stop them. That is the perfect gift-wrapped premise to a video game, but no, let's make 2 games where the Autobots dick around doing nothing and then go to Siberia to accomplish nothing for 2 damn hours. The game ends with Optimus going off to fight Megatron and Shockwave alone, giving a rousing speech to his assembled troops to carry on if he doesn't make it back. So one improvement to the Wii version. This game actually has the climactic battle between Optimus, Megatron, and Shockwave. And it plays out off-screen, because the last level hands control over to Ironhide, Optimus has already driven off Shockwave and Megatron, and the last level is you chasing Megatron out of his own base like a bitch. You still never fight Shockwave despite the entire game building him up as this huge, epic threat. Maybe you never fight Shockwave because his character model is fuck ugly. I wouldn't want that on screen either. The one part that I like about this whole game is the last cutscene where Ratchet turns to the camera and he says, and I quote, "So, did we just win?" The game itself has no idea what its own story was about. That is amazing. That's the last Transformers movie license game I've got for you, and pretty much the last Transformers games that I own. I did pick up the War for Cybertron games during the Steam Summer Sale and right before my computer disappeared for 2 weeks, but we'll save them for another time. I've played and reviewed 8 Transformers games in a row. If I do one more, I think I'll actually become a Transformer, like Nerdimus Prime or something. So what else is there on the old to-review list that's not Transformers related?
Be sure your step through the heart of madness.